Cybersecurity is about more than just technology. It's about how people behave with emails, data, and cloud applications that directly impacts your company's security posture. Security works best when it's ingrained in the culture of your organization. To learn how to build a security culture and transform your employees from targets into a strong line of defense, head to securityweekly.com/proofpoint and visit their Cybersecurity Awareness Center. The hybrid workforce is here to stay, and it requires real-time visibility, control, and rapid response of every endpoint, whether it's in the office or home. Tanium offers an endpoint management and security platform built for the most demanding IT environments. Many of the world's largest and most sophisticated organizations, including nearly half of the Fortune 100, rely on Tanium to deliver unmatched endpoint visibility and control. Whether you're preparing for zero trust or protecting your network from supply chain risk, Tanium empowers technology leaders to achieve greater agility, efficiency, and confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Tanium.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Join us in our next live webcast on October 21st to learn why zero-knowledge encryption matters. Visit securityweekly.com/webcast to save your seat. Don't forget to check out our library of on-demand webcasts and technical trainings at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right, and this interview is sponsored by Contrast Security. Surag Patel joins us today to talk about why less is more for static application scanning. Surag brings more than a decade of experience to Contrast Security, where he serves as the Chief Security Officer. Welcome to the show, Surag.
Hey, thanks, Adrian. Excited to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Yeah, so definitely an area that's I think constantly changing and very quickly evolving. This particular area of AppSec, where we talk about, how to, especially in DevOps, how to get tools integrated into the workflows and into the CI/CD pipelines.
Yeah, it's a hot topic. Always a conversation point around, hey, shifting left, we use that way too commonly. We enable code analysis earlier and earlier in the process. And so an area of focus for us, but at Contrast, we've kind of always focused on how do we do it in a way that's native for the way software is built today, not how it was written 10 or 15 years ago.
Right. So it seems like a good place to start. What has changed with the tooling, and why is it why is it that we need newer tooling built and designed for how folks are doing things today to integrate into these pipelines?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's so many different analogies I can give in our real world lives, but as technology modernizes, you need new tooling. It's as simple as that, for many reasons. In the world of software, writing software, testing software, validating software, today's software is very different than it was a decade ago from several different dimensions. One is the architecture of the software is different, right? API heavy architectures, microservices, nano services, as some of our customers call them. There's different ways you write the software, and therefore the analysis you do is distinctly different. I don't have monoliths as I used to, where I can just run through tens of thousands of lines of code and have the full context of everything it's doing right there in one place, right? That's very different than how it used to be. So that's the architecture. The other element is simply the speed, right? The rate at which we're writing software today and the amount we're writing it and the amount of testing we're doing, the pipelines, the frequency of that entire cycle, again, necessitates it to be simply different. And so that you can run it in a way that doesn't slow you down. I've got to ship more software quickly, and that's paramount to my business, to my top line. And I'd say those are the two. And then the third is probably, a little bit tied back to actually a bit of a conversation from the previous segment, but, simply there's not enough expertise these days, right? The number of people who are security experts is not sufficient. Trying to train more people is possible, but a different way to solve the problem. And so we simply need tools to be better. We don't have the time and the energy and the luxury of having a bunch of security expert software developers out in the market. We can constantly train them, and we should, of course. But we also need the technology to simply be better.
Yeah, so it's a good lead in into how we do that with tooling. I guess you can have people sit through classes and things like that, send them off to conferences, get certifications and things like that. But again, you talked about the need for speed, and I think a lot of people have found out the hard way that if you step in front of the DevOps train, you just get run over. it's not going to stop for you.
Yeah.
So, and that seems like another good opportunity here, especially when you're integrating with IDEs and with the pipeline, to do training, kind of just in time as you go.
Yeah, and to your point, there's numerous ways to do it, right? And there's not one solution that I'm going to say is the magical silver bullet, but there's training in the traditional senses. Get folks in a classroom, train them in their educational process, give them coursework, give them examples, let them learn that way. That's one that works. There's another way that I went to the undergraduate school I went to had a motto that said "Learn by doing." That was our school or my university's motto, and in that world is another way that you can train kind of just in time as folks are doing what they do. So just imagine, when you get to a world where some of the tooling is built natively for today, the way software is written today, you can, and it's possible, technology is possible these days, to find an issue and shift it back right then and there to the developer to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Developer, here's an issue. Here's a line of code. Here's why it's a problem. Hey, if you don't know what this vulnerability is, let us link you to a OWASP web page that explains to you this kind of vulnerability and why it happens. Here's a line of code. Here's how you would fix it. Right then and there, literally in their IDE or through a Slack alert or through a Jira ticket. And then you get this kind of a different type of training, I should say. I'm not going to say better or worse, but you get kind of what we've called our customers, or actually what our customers have called to us, micro training, right? You get results right then and there. And when a developer kind of goes through that a couple times, guess what? They stop making that mistake slowly because they just realize, hey, they find the patterns. That's what they're good at generally. They find the patterns and they're given instruction and guidance on, hey, this is an issue. Here's why it's an issue. Here's how you would write better code.
And I think for that to be successful, what you're sending back to the developer has to be an issue. And I think some of the problems we've had with static code analysis is it tells us that this might be an issue. And I've learned and experienced as a developer myself, I don't want to know about the things that might be an issue because that's just more work for me and I got to get this release out. Like, only tell me about the things that are an issue. And oftentimes, static code analysis is not the way to do that. You're going to go find that bug and exploit it once the app has stood up, and then it's a real issue.
Amen. 100% agree. And I think that's exactly part of the issue of how something like static analysis has been, we're trying to stick a square peg in a round hole in many cases, right? I don't, A, give me stuff that's only accurate. Don't give me stuff that's a false positive or not truly an issue. And B, don't give me the nice to haves. Frankly, I don't have time for the nice to haves. I'm not sure many developers who do. Give me the most critical stuff that's going to put me on the front page of the newspaper tomorrow. That's the stuff I really care about, and it better be accurate.
Yeah,
period.
Because I think, it's interesting. I've looked at some of the open source vulnerabilities in depth with some of the researchers from Qualys, right, as an example. And the way that they analyze the code and put those together, I'm like, they don't even use static analysis tools. I'm like, I don't think static analysis, they're not gonna find those issues, right? Now, if you got a clear case where, like, this statement, the way you wrote it, is in fact SQL injection, right? That's one thing. But if you look at the trends in analyzing open source software, as an example, the bugs that they're finding today are very esoteric and often require multiple steps that I think it's hard pressed to find those in static code. You might find indications that could lead to that, but that's not, we already established that's not what's helpful, right?
I absolutely agree. And actually the origin of Contrast and part of our first products to market are exactly built on that premise, right? Is the best way to find things accurately, continuously, and constantly throughout your development process is by seeing it running. Now, you don't actually have to wait till it's in production. You see it running because you test all day long. You don't have to do security tests, but just functional tests, smoke tests, unit tests, integration tests. All of those are running software, right? And so, the original Contrast product, Contrast, what we call Contrast Assess, is built with that notion and actually defined a brand new category that even kind of Gartner and the industry has recognized now as a interactive approach to application security testing, right? And that's built exactly for that reason, right? Those things are esoteric. You don't find these things in static code. And if you do, you have to make a lot of assumptions. And guess what? Assumptions generally means inaccuracy.
For sure.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, this kind of just-in-time approach. Your company's name is Contrast Security, but it could almost be context security. Because it's so important to, like, there's so many trainings I've been through that tell you, be wary of this, don't do this, don't do that, and all that goes out the window, 2 months later when you need it. It means so much more, to get hit with that lesson at the moment you're making the mistake. Almost like having somebody mentoring you as you're going through and making mistakes.
Absolutely right. And, just a quick sidebar, because you mentioned the Contrast name and context, the name actually came from, you may recall the notion of contrast in MRIs and medical imaging. They inject this little dye in your body, and all of a sudden when they do a scan, it glows with way more accuracy and context than you would get if you just did a scan effectively, right? That's actually where the name Contrast comes from. But to your point on the context, why do we look for vulnerabilities? Why do tools exist to find vulnerabilities? It's quite simple. We want to fix them. We want customers and the industry to ship secure software. Finding stuff doesn't matter if you're not fixing it, frankly. And so the idea of giving the accurate findings in context is to drive the outcome we all want, which is fix the problem. Mean time to remediation is really the kind of key metric here. And so that's generally what our customers are looking at and kind of aiming for is, hey, we want to take mean time to remediation. There's plenty of reports out there from every vendor you can imagine that say, on average, a critical highs and critical vulnerabilities will take something like, it takes about 6 months to fix half of what is found. That's unacceptable, simply, in today's world. And so that's a metric our customers always drive towards, like, how do I get, instead of taking 6 months to solve half of what I find, how can I solve half, or ideally all of what I find within a couple days or a week for that matter? Because then you're getting it in context, you're fixing it right away, and then you get that efficiency that you're looking for.
Yeah. So, going back to the title of the segment, why less is more. I know from my experiences in security, we tend to, worry about, not having a tool or not having visibility in every step of the process and every place. We tend to want to hoard every log, and keep a bit of everything. And so why is that mentality not work here? And what's the, what are you going after with the less is more here?
It's not just a Unix dad joke.
Less is more. Oh man, thank you, Paul. Mm-hmm. That did not even occur to me.
Yeah, it's Paul is actually back to Paul's comment just a little while ago, right? Developers don't want a 300-page PDF of which 200, and this is a real stat from a real commercial tool that's used very widely. A customer of ours sent us a report they got for an application, 300 pages of PDF of findings. Okay, we put our security researchers on that 300-page report, which they did not want to read, but they did. And they said, and the reality of the 300-page report was 6 were worthwhile.
Yeah,
they're not a false positive or things that they really have to worry about. And so
that's not a good ratio.
Thought about not a good ratio at all. And now why static analysis tools have a bad rap, because we're trying to stick this square peg in a round hole, frankly. And so when we thought, there was like, look, our goal is to find 6, and that's it. We don't want to find 10 of which only 6 are accurate, or find 300 of which 6 are accurate. We need to find the stuff that matters, and that's really it. Don't give me the notes and the lows, and all that stuff can be found later by some auditor somewhere. Give me the stuff that matters and give it to me accurately. And that's really, really critical. So that's also kind of been our motto as we design products.
I also think in that example, Surag, that it's awesome for a developer or a systems administrator, right? When you get the report and maybe you have those 300 findings, but it's broken down to be like, all right, if you fix this one thing, it wipes out 127, right, of those findings. And so now in the static analysis, I can go to my code and be like, and I did this like when I was converting from Python 2 to 3. Like, there's this, the way you did it in 2.7 was this way, but in 3 it's this way. So go find all those points in your code, and now I wipe out, 47 issues that make my code compatible with Python 3. And I just, search and replace, go through and change those things. Those are the kinds of things developers I think appreciate and are looking for.
So that raises a good point. How much of that 300-page report is due to the way it was reported being inefficient, and not summarizing things effectively, and how much of it is just poor testing?
It's a little bit of both, frankly. Well, some of it is again, the tools were probably built for software that was built in monolithic days, right? Not built for teams that are applications now that use APIs to communicate with other services or work in smaller contextual elements. So there's that, I think, is a key piece of it. But the other piece is, like, to your point, the reporting and frankly, the limitations of only having a static context. If I only have static context, I can't really understand very well what is real and what is not, right? And that's, again, for us, as we think about it, there is not a single tool that will solve every problem, but having kind of a set of capabilities across the spectrum that's used by developers then and there in the IDE or in their pull request process is distinct from what you can do during the pipeline, right? When it's in the CI/CD, I have a lot more context. The application's running. I can get much more accurate context across different services. And so kind of merging together those various capabilities is really where it all starts coming together.
Yeah, and I think a great example of that too, to help developers out, because you're not gonna be able to fix everything all at once. You're gonna have to prioritize even those 6 findings. And when it comes to like software composition analysis, my bone to pick with that is, like, it'll just tell you that you've got a vulnerable library. And I'm like, that's great. Okay, so now I spent the, half hour to an hour and I researched that and I'm like, okay, yes, it's a vulnerable module that I've included, but I'm not accessing the vulnerable method within that module. So like now you just wasted a half an hour of my time that I could have been spending fixing something that actually matters, filing the Jira ticket that, like, later on we should always upgrade that library. That should be part of your process. But if you don't need to do that right now, go fix something that matters now, or go work on the next feature and then fix that in the next release, because the risk level is low. But it's not properly conveying that risk is what I often find in those tools that get developers really angry.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, to bring that to life again, and this is, to come back to, like, there's static scanning capabilities, but there's interactive abilities, and there's even protection, right? So, like,
yes.
To take your example, Paul, to bring it to life, is for us, with static analysis, and it doesn't matter who does the static analysis, right? Whether it's contrast or some other vendor, static is static. So to do static analysis of code and find your libraries is actually technically an extremely simple problem. I just look for the library, I match it up to a publicly available database, and I tell you if there's a vulnerability. That's right. Actually very simple, right? But for us, like in the pipeline, when you're running that application, our interactive approach and what we call kind of the interactive SCA can actually tell us with much greater accuracy, hey, I know you have this library and there's a vulnerability. That's easy. But let me tell you if you're using any of the classes within that library, of which, guess what? 80% of the time, the answer is actually no. I'm not even using it. And so we add that context, but to get that context, you need to see the application running. Otherwise, you can't get that with static analysis. And so that's where, having static early on in the process, having the interactive piece in the middle is great. And then for us, the last piece of our kind of broader platform is there's also protections, right? We can weave in a protection when you run a workload in production. And so we can even tell you, hey, this is actually protected in production. So you still probably should fix it, maybe when you get the time, when the priority is right. But you can rest assured that if someone's trying to attack your struts 2 vulnerability, it's going to get protected in production, right? And that's for us the last element of the, my non-technical analogy, like the airbag, right? You can be as proactive as you want, wear seatbelts and leave the home safely, but you still generally want that airbag for the unexpected or the new. things that you didn't anticipate to happen, or the things you didn't have time to fix, frankly.
Surag, can you provide telemetry on privileges as well? In other words, like I've got a vulnerable library. Maybe I am calling a vulnerable method, but I'm only calling that in the part of the application that requires the highest level of admin privileges, not unauthenticated. I believe you could probably give us some of that context as well.
The data is there, but the product doesn't do it today.
Okay.
It's a great. I'm writing that feature down to share with our team. We have the context to do it, frankly, because we can tell how the application is behaving to just give you a sense of the power. But it's not. We don't actually report on that today. We wouldn't tell you that this is happening in a privileged area of the application or not.
Right. But you tell me what area of the application it is operating in. As a developer, you'll probably pretty quickly go, well, that's only for people who are logged in with this privilege level, so therefore I'm setting the priority accordingly.
Yeah. We actually, it's interesting. It just happened to us 2 weeks ago. We often have customers who come back to us and say, "Hey, this finding that you found for me in my interactive piece of my analysis is a false positive," and we help them look at it. And we can say, "No, it's actually not. Guess what, Mr. Customer? What you just found is a vulnerability in an open source library that is not even yet disclosed. The world doesn't know about it yet because our code doesn't care if it's custom code or open source code.
That's awesome.
If we see a vulnerability in the code path, whether it's your code or not, we will report on it. If it's in a public library and it's a publicly published CVE, we'll obviously tell you. But in many cases, our customers are finding CVEs that the world doesn't even know about yet. Frankly.
Yeah, that's not surprising, because actually, when you look at how much code is out there, right, and how much code hasn't been scrutinized at that level. That's really cool.
Exactly right.
New feature request coming up, a button to open a CVE for this finding.
Right.
Hey, that is a work in progress, Adrian. It is my, it's funny and going into our roadmap a little bit, but I've been telling our team for a while, I want to build this like, in Gmail, they have the click here if it's not spam button, like this little button. Or if it is spam, you click the button and it'll send it off to some, smart people in a back room who will validate it manually. And so my goal is to have that kind of button where customers can say, "Hey, I don't know about this result. Can you click it?" And they'll send it to our experts. And they'll come back and say, "Yep, it's a vulnerability in an open source library." And guess what? We're going to publish the CVE, or we're going to start the responsible disclosure process for you on the CVE.
That's awesome.
And even let our customers report it. How cool would that be?
Yeah, that's more and more a trend we're seeing with security vendors, where there is some kind of team, that you can kind of punt something to that you're stuck on, that will kind of help you out of that rut, help you figure out what you're looking at.
Yeah, we come from a more traditional, like tech-heavy founding team, and for us, generally, anytime a human needs to be involved, we consider it we historically used to consider it a gap in the product. But frankly, I think that was an immature way to think about it, frankly, because things like this, you really do need the expert, right? We have in our we call our labs team a bunch of security researchers. These are folks who are like on Facebook's Hall of Fame and find CVEs all day long and weekends because that's what they enjoy doing. But you need folks like that to help you just validate things at times, right? And so we're starting to build up and have built up a pretty amazing set of security researchers. Now the name of the game is scaling that up, right?
Yeah, you certainly got to be careful with it. You open that up too much and, you can create a problem for yourself.
Yeah, we have no intention of being a services company at all. But if there's very specialty experience or knowledge that we can help with, we want to make sure we can bring that.
So for a company looking to implement something like this, where do they start? Certainly, I think in a perfect world, buy the product, hand it to the developers, they'll clean up the mess and they'll integrate it into their ongoing daily process. But in real life, maybe they never set up the tool, install the tool. And then there's also like where do you start? Do you focus on getting developers integrating it into their daily workflow first, or do you work on cleaning up the existing mess? Since you're coming in for the first time, those scans are going to be kind of heavy. The results coming back from that, I would imagine. Or is it a mix of both?
It's really a mix a little bit, and this is generally where one size doesn't fit all for every enterprise, right? Generally speaking, most of our customers will come in and start deploying a new process, a new model in their pipeline. So in their validation and testing phases, if I may. Now that's still very close to development, but it's not technically the developers. It's mostly maybe testing or in the pipeline, things like that. And the reason they do it there is you get the accuracy, you get the continuous feedback. It doesn't slow down development necessarily. And so that's a common place for most folks to start if they're thinking DevOps, DevSecOps. The more advanced ones say, hey, okay, this is great. I've got it webbed into my pipeline or connected to my pipeline to get constant context. But I want to even happen a little bit earlier, as the developer is checking in some code, as they're doing their pull request even earlier in the process. And so that's actually a big reason why we just announced and extended this static scanning capabilities over the last month. We just announced our capabilities there in approximately the last few weeks. And it's mostly to extend into that portion of the development lifecycle, right? So when you're making a pull request, give me some of the most critical results accurately right then and there, so I don't have to wait for my pipeline to kind of continue and execute over the next several minutes. So we see that. And then finally, like I said, one size doesn't fit all, although most of our customers will start like in the pipeline and then shift left, or we call extend right. There's others that may start differently. For example, there's some who say, I kind of want to think of scanning as a process I just want to enable the developers to do. They've told me they want to do it, which would be surprising, but sometimes they do, early in the process. And so they empower them with this kind of static scanning capability. And there's others yet who say, hey, look, man, let's just start with open source. Okay, fine. Let's stick the open source SCA analysis in there. I always like to challenge that, frankly, because it is risky and you should look at it, absolutely right. But it's even riskier to not look at your custom code and only look at the open source. It's a pretty scary thought, frankly. And so, it really is a combination of all of the above, frankly.
Anything else that you want to cover, Surag, that we haven't covered so far? I know you've got a lot of research that's come out. Some good stuff that's attached actually to the show notes for the show today.
Yeah, I would say, look, take a look at the research that's out there. Enterprises all day long, large, medium, and small, are constantly looking for ways to deliver more secure software faster, efficiently. I think maybe to Paul's comment earlier. And I think my simple kind of comment would be, it's possible. Many folks come to us and say, I've tried this static analysis thing. It just kind of gets me in trouble with my development team. It's always a siloed security versus developer kind of culture here. And I would just kind of listen, but I would definitely let them know that it's possible to have a very amazing and strong relationship between security and development, where you are mutually supporting each other. Security is not slowing development down. Development's actually writing better code, so that what's going out the door at the end of the process is making your company and your enterprise much more secure, right? So we have plenty of stats, Adrian, as you mentioned. There's reports galore based on real-time continuous data from tens of thousands of applications continuously across pretty much every vertical you can think of, where we show things like mean time to remediation. How are customers who build a strong development security relationship able to fix things faster? How are they able to kind of weave things in the way that they want? So check out some of the results, and then we will have upcoming here next week, actually, a new report focused on specifically serverless workloads. And so I know that's been a hot topic. Many folks keep asking us, hey, well, how does this apply to serverless or serverless functions? And so we just did a new research report on that we'll be happy to publish next week.
I definitely want to check that out, because I've got some code that I want to port over to serverless, and I'm wondering, like, defensively, how do I need to adjust it so that it's not susceptible to vulnerabilities?
Yeah, and it's a scary thought. Like in the serverless world, although it's been active for some time now, there are really no purpose-built tools to help you write secure serverless functions. There's several that help you protect the running workload, right? The cloud protection platforms. But there's nothing that helps you actually write a secure serverless function today in market. So stay tuned next week.
Awesome.
Very nice. Surag, thanks so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Hey, likewise. This is great. Thank you. Thank you both.
And make sure you visit securityweekly.com/contrast for more information. We'll be right back in a few moments with the weekly enterprise news.